Everyone got houses, and he inherited only a chicken, but its secret was worth more than everything. Nathan Cooper felt his stomach churn when the lawyer spoke his name for the last time. While his cousins walked away with property deeds in their hands, he held only a piece of paper stating he had inherited a chicken. A chicken. "Sorry, I think there's been a mistake," said Nathan, his voice trembling. "My grandma couldn't have left me just this." Dr. Harold adjusted his glasses and reread the document. There was no mistake. Elizabeth Cooper, in full possession of her mental faculties, had decided to leave her youngest grandson only the chicken penny. Nothing else. "Everything is correct here, young man. The lady was very clear in her last wishes." Nathan looked around the room. His cousin Ryan was already pocketing the keys to the house in the city center, a property worth at least $300,000. Jennifer, the other cousin, had received the beach house the family had used for decades. Even the more distant grandchildren had gotten something: land, apartments, savings. "This is a bad joke," Uncle Walter's voice cut through the silence. The bald man, with his arms crossed, looked at Nathan with a mix of pity and satisfaction. "Elizabeth always had her favorites, but this is too much." "Walter, don't be cruel," said Margaret, his wife, but her voice lacked conviction. She too seemed embarrassed by the situation. Nathan felt his cheeks burn. At 17, he had just lost the only person who truly cared about him, and now he discovered that not even she considered him worthy of a decent inheritance. The chicken penny, as if that was something of value. "Can I at least see this chicken?" he asked, trying to maintain his dignity. The lawyer indicated yes. The bird was in the back of Elizabeth's small rural property in Bayshore, countryside of Washington state. Nathan knew that place well. He had spent every summer of his childhood there, running through the fields, helping his grandma tend the garden, listening to her stories at night. Ryan let out a short laugh. "Dude, I'm really sorry. But look on the bright side. At least you'll have fresh eggs." Some laughed. Nathan didn't. He left the room without waiting for the others. The fresh March air hit his face as he walked out of the small lawyer's office in downtown Bayshore. The coastal town seemed strangely normal, as if the world hadn't just collapsed on him. Elizabeth Cooper had passed away just 5 days ago. The funeral had been simple, as she had requested, but Nathan couldn't accept that she was gone, and now this absurd inheritance felt like a final stab. Why? What had he done wrong? He walked the streets with no particular destination, his hands in the pockets of his worn-out jeans. He had come by bus from Seattle for the reading of the will, using his last savings. He lived in a small rented room near college, worked nights at a grocery store to pay for his studies. The inheritance could have changed his life, but no. He had a chicken. His phone vibrated. It was a message from Jennifer. "Sorry, Nate. Grandma must have been confused at the end. If you need anything, let me know." Confused. Was that it? Elizabeth was 82 when she passed, but her mind was sharp until the last day. Nathan remembered the last conversations they had. She was lucid, aware, still joking about him getting a girlfriend. He stopped in front of a bakery. The smell of fresh bread made his stomach growl. He hadn't eaten anything since morning, but he had no money to waste. He needed to get back to Seattle, back to work, back to that difficult life that now seemed even more hopeless. But something bothered him. Elizabeth did nothing without a reason. She was a practical, objective woman. If she had left the chicken to him, there must have been a reason. Nathan decided to go to the property before heading home. He needed to see this so-called penny with his own eyes to understand what his grandmother had been thinking. The house was about a 15-minute walk from the town center. It was a simple single-story building with light-colored walls and a clay tile roof. All around, open fields stretched as far as the eye could see. Nathan had the key, which Elizabeth had given him months ago, saying he would always be welcome there. As he approached, he saw that Walter and Margaret were already there. Their car, a black sedan, was parked out front. Nathan hesitated, but kept walking. Technically, part of that property was his now, too, since the land had been divided among all the grandchildren. "Look who's here," Walter said as Nathan approached. "Came to claim your fortune?" "I just want to see the chicken." Margaret was rummaging through some boxes on the porch. She looked at Nathan with a strange, almost nervous expression. Nathan, you understand your grandma was old, right? People that age sometimes do odd things. She wasn't senile, if that's what you mean. I'm not saying that, Margaret hurried to add. But you have to admit leaving a chicken as an inheritance is at the very least unusual. Walter snorted. Unusual is an understatement. It's ridiculous. Elizabeth always had a soft spot for you, Nathan. I thought you'd get something good, but this is almost an insult. The words hurt more than Nathan expected. He looked away, feeling his eyes burn. He wasn't going to cry in front of them. He wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. Where is she? He asked, his voice firm. Out back, where she always is, Margaret replied. Nathan, if you want, we can take care of her. You don't have to worry about bringing a chicken to Seattle. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. No, Nathan said too quickly. She's mine. Grandma left her to me. He didn't know why he was being so defensive about a bird he barely knew. But there was something about this whole situation that didn't add up, and Nathan needed to figure out what. He walked past his aunt and uncle and went around the house. The backyard was familiar. The wooden chicken coop Elizabeth kept, the small vegetable garden, the fruit trees. And there, in a separate pen from the other birds, was Penny. Nathan stopped and watched. The chicken was different. She wasn't an ordinary farm bird. Her feathers were a light golden color, almost beige, with highlights that seemed to shine in the sunlight. She was larger than normal chickens, and had an almost dignified posture as she pecked at the ground. But what really caught Nathan's attention was the mark on her feathers. On the right side of the bird's body, someone had painted a symbol. It looked like a circle with crossed lines inside, like a wheel or a star. The paint was faded but still visible. Weird, Nathan murmured, moving closer. Penny lifted her head and looked at him. For a ridiculous moment, Nathan had the impression that the chicken recognized him. She took a few steps toward him, pecked twice, and went back to the corner of the pen. Nathan opened the small gate and went inside. Penny didn't startle. She kept pecking, as if his presence was completely natural. He crouched down, watching her closely. "What's so special about you?" he asked quietly. The chicken stopped and turned her head toward him. Her round, dark eyes seemed too intelligent for a bird. Nathan slowly reached out his hand, and to his surprise, Penny approached and let him touch her. Her feathers were soft, well cared for. Elizabeth must have spent hours tending to this chicken. But why? What was so important about her? "Nathan," Margaret's voice called him. "We're leaving. Do you want a ride to the bus station?" He looked at Penny, then at the house. Something inside him said to stay, to investigate further. But what was he going to investigate? It was just a chicken. "I'll take the ride," he replied, stepping out of the pen, "but I'm taking her with me." "Take the chicken?" Walter appeared, incredulous. "To Seattle? You live in an apartment." "In a room," Nathan corrected, "and I'll figure it out." It didn't make sense, he knew, but it also didn't make sense for his grandma to have left only this bird to him. And if there was one thing Nathan had learned from Elizabeth, it was that she never did anything without a purpose. Margaret exchanged a look with Walter. "All right, it's your decision, but you'll need a box or cage for transport." Nathan found a cardboard box in the back of the house and poked some holes for ventilation. Penny went in without resistance, as if she knew she needed to go with him. It was unsettling how cooperative that chicken seemed. During the trip back to the bus station, Walter remained silent, driving with a closed expression. Margaret tried to make conversation, asking about Nathan's studies, about his work, but his answers were short. His mind was elsewhere, trying to understand it all. "Your grandma loved you, you know," Margaret said suddenly when they were almost there. "She talked about you all the time." "It doesn't seem like it," Nathan replied, more bitter than he intended. "Things aren't always what they seem," she said, and there was something strange in her voice, a tension that Nathan couldn't identify. They dropped him off at the bus station. Nathan bought a ticket to Seattle and waited on a bench with the box beside him. A few people looked on curiously, probably wondering what was inside. His phone vibrated again. Another message, this time from Ryan. Seriously, you took the chicken? Ha 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 ha, dude, you're crazy. Nathan put his phone away without replying. To hell with all of them. He was going to find out what Elizabeth meant with that bizarre inheritance, even if it was the last thing he did. The bus took 3 hours to Seattle. The whole way, Nathan kept thinking. Memories of his grandma came in waves. Elizabeth had always been a strong woman who raised 5 children alone after her husband left her. She worked as a seamstress her whole life, saved every penny, bought that property in Bayshore with the sweat of her brow. She was wise, observant. She noticed things others didn't. And she had a very particular sense of justice. Nathan remembered a conversation they had about a year ago. He was visiting her on a Sunday, and Elizabeth was sewing in the living room. "You know what I admire most about you, my grandson?" she asked, without taking her eyes off the fabric. "What, Grandma?" "You don't give up. Life hasn't been easy for you, but you keep trying. You keep studying, working, pushing yourself. Many people in your place would have thrown in the towel by now." "Sometimes I think about giving up," he confessed. "I know, but you won't. Because you have something that many people don't have." "What?" Elizabeth finally looked at him, and her brown eyes shone with something Nathan couldn't identify. "Perseverance, and the ability to see value where others see nothing." At the time, Nathan didn't fully understand what she meant, but now, holding that box with a chicken inside, the words took on a different meaning. When he arrived in Seattle, it was already night. The room he rented was in the back of a house in the Greenwood district, a modest neighborhood. The lady who owned the house, Edith Miller, was 73 years old and rented out the room to help with her income. Nathan knocked on the front door, nervous. Mrs. Miller opened it, wearing a floral robe. "Nathan, good to have you back. How was the—" She stopped, looking at the box. "What is that?" "It's a chicken." "A what?" "Chicken. My grandma left her to me as an inheritance." Mrs. Miller blinked several times, processing the information. "You're telling me your grandma, God rest her soul, left a chicken as an inheritance?" "Yes. And you brought her here. I have no other place." The woman sighed deeply, but there was an amused glint in her eyes. "Well, I've seen everything in this life. Come in, come in. Let's see what we can do with this." "Penny, you said." "How do you know her name?" "You said it while coming in." She lied, but Nathan didn't notice. In the back of Mrs. Miller's house, there was a small yard with some plants. Nathan improvised a pen using old crates and wire mesh he found in the shed. Penny was settled there, with water and a bit of corn the lady had at home. "She's pretty," commented Mrs. Miller, observing the bird. "I've never seen a chicken with those colors. And that mark on the feathers, what is it?" "I don't know. I think my grandma painted it." "Your grandma was a wise woman, Nathan. If she left only this for you, there's a reason. She was the second person to say something like that." Nathan wanted to believe it, but it was hard not to feel rejected. That night, lying in his small room, Nathan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Elizabeth, the inheritance, that strange chicken. He grabbed his phone and started researching rare chickens, special breeds, valuable chickens. He found some information about ornamental breeds, chickens bred for their beauty or rarity. Some could be worth thousands of dollars. Could Penny be one of those? But even the most expensive ones wouldn't justify his grandma's choice. If she wanted to leave money for Nathan, she would have sold the chicken and left the cash. It didn't make sense. Unless... Nathan sat up in bed, an idea beginning to form. What if the chicken wasn't the inheritance itself? What if it was a clue? A way to reach something bigger? Elizabeth loved puzzles. She used to create riddles for her grandchildren when they were kids, little challenges that made them think. What if this was just another one of those riddles, only on a larger scale? Nathan's heart raced. He needed to examine Penny more carefully. He needed to understand that mark on the feathers, see if there was anything else. But it was too late. He would have to wait until morning. He woke up before the alarm, anxious. He took a quick shower and went out to the yard as soon as it was light. Penny was awake, pecking at the ground in the makeshift pen. Nathan approached slowly and picked up the chicken carefully. She didn't resist, just kept that calm, intelligent gaze. He examined the feathers, looking for anything unusual. The painted mark still intrigued him. It was definitely handmade, with black ink. The symbol looked like a circle divided into 4 parts by 2 lines crossing in the center. Or was it a target? A compass rose? He turned the chicken over, examined the feet, the wings. Nothing different. He was about to give up when he noticed something. Attached with a small metal ring to Penny's left foot, there was a tiny capsule. It was so discreet it went unnoticed at first glance. With trembling fingers, Nathan removed the ring. The capsule was made of light metal the size of a large pill. It had a screw-on cap. "What did you find?" Mrs. Miller's voice startled him. He turned, holding the capsule. It was attached to her foot. "Open it." Nathan twisted the cap. Inside was a rolled-up paper so thin it felt like silk. He unrolled it carefully and immediately recognized Elizabeth's handwriting. "My dear Nathan," the message said, "if you're reading this, it means you found me and are starting to understand. Penny is not just a chicken. She is the key. Every day at dawn, watch what she does. When she pecks 3 times in the same spot, dig there. You will understand everything. Trust me, trust her. With love, your Grandma Elizabeth." Nathan reread the message 3 times, his heart pounding. "What does it say?" asked Mrs. Miller. He showed her the paper. The woman read it silently and then looked at Penny with new eyes. "Your grandma really was a special woman. But what does this mean? Pecking 3 times. Dig where? I think you'll have to watch and find out." Nathan spent the rest of the day trying to focus on his college classes, but his mind was in Mrs. Miller's backyard with the chicken. When he got home in the afternoon, before heading to his job at the market, he rushed to see Penny. The chicken was in the same spot, pecking normally. Nathan watched for 20 minutes but saw nothing special. She pecked seemingly at random, searching for insects or seeds. "Maybe it's only in the morning," suggested Mrs. Miller, who had come out to water the plants. "She said at dawn, didn't she?" It made sense. Nathan would have to wake up earlier the next day. That night at the market, he could barely work properly. His boss, Mr. Anthony, a short and always grumpy man, complained twice about his distraction. "Cooper, you're in another world today. Focus or you'll have to find another job." Nathan tried hard to improve, but it was difficult. His head was full of questions. What had his grandma hidden? Could it be money, documents, something of sentimental value? And why didn't she just leave it all to him directly? Why create this game of clues? Maybe because she knew the other family members wouldn't approve. Walter had always been greedy. Margaret, though kinder, never took Nathan very seriously. His cousins saw him as the poor relative, the one who hadn't achieved anything in life. If Elizabeth had left something valuable to Nathan openly, they might have contested the will, caused problems. But a chicken? No one would fight over a chicken. It was clever, very clever. Nathan got home at 2 in the morning, exhausted. He set the alarm for 5:30, just before dawn, and passed out in bed. It felt like he had just closed his eyes when the alarm went off. Nathan dragged himself out of bed, washed his face with cold water to wake up, and went out into the backyard while it was still dark. Penny was starting to wake up. The chicken stretched, if one can say chicken stretch, and began moving around the pen. Nathan positioned himself to observe everything, mentally noting each movement. The first rays of sun began to appear on the horizon, lighting up the backyard with a golden glow, and then it happened. Penny stopped in the southeast corner of the pen. She pecked once, stopped, pecked twice in the same spot, stopped again, looking around, and then deliberately pecked a 3rd time. Nathan felt a shiver. It couldn't be a coincidence. The chicken had done exactly what Elizabeth described. He waited to see if she would repeat the behavior elsewhere, but Penny simply went back to pecking normally, searching for food. It was there, Nathan murmured to himself, mentally marking the spot. But there was a problem. That wasn't the backyard of Elizabeth's house. It was Mrs. Miller's backyard in Seattle. How could his grandma's message refer to this place? Unless... Nathan ran inside and grabbed the paper from the capsule again. He reread every word. When she pecks 3 times in the same spot, dig there. It didn't say where, just where she pecked. Could it be that Penny had been trained to do this, to indicate specific places, no matter where she was? It seemed absurd, but no more absurd than everything else. Nathan went back to the backyard with a small gardening shovel he had borrowed. Mrs. Miller had woken up and was coming out of the house. "Did you find something?" "She pecked 3 times in the same spot. I'm going to dig there." "In my backyard? I'll put the dirt back afterward, I promise." The woman nodded, more curious than worried. Nathan started digging where Penny had indicated. The soil was soft, easy to remove. He dug about 8 inches, then 12. Nothing. He kept digging, starting to think he had misunderstood everything when the shovel hit something solid. Nathan dug around with his hands, careful. It was a box, a small metal box, no bigger than a book, all rusted. "My God," whispered Mrs. Miller. He took the box out of the earth and cleaned it with trembling hands. It had no lock, just a lid that opened with a little force. Inside were more papers. Letters, it seemed. And an old photo. Nathan picked up the photo first. It was in black and white, faded by time. It showed a very pretty young woman with dark hair and a wide smile. She was hugging a tall man with a mustache. On the back, a note. Elizabeth and Albert, 1965. Albert, Nathan's grandfather, the man who had abandoned the family when the children were still young. The letters were yellowed, but the ink was still legible. Nathan opened the first one, and his heart almost stopped. "My beloved Elizabeth," it began, "forgive me for everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know the truth." Nathan read the entire letter, then the second, the third. Each one revealed a piece of a story he had never heard. A story that changed everything he thought he knew about his family. Albert hadn't abandoned Elizabeth by choice. He had been forced. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. According to the letters, Albert had unintentionally gotten involved in a complicated situation at work. He was an accountant for a transport company and discovered that the owner was embezzling money from several partners. When Albert threatened to report it, he received threats. Serious threats. Not only against him, but against Elizabeth and the children. The owner of the company, a man named Oliver Davidson, had dangerous connections. He gave Albert an ultimatum: disappear and pretend you're abandoning your family, or everyone will suffer the consequences. Albert chose to protect his own. He left home, spread rumors that he had another woman, made it look like he was just another unfaithful husband. But the truth was that he was in hiding, trying to find a way to destroy Oliver Davidson without putting the family at risk. The letters narrated years of attempts. Albert tried to gather evidence, sought allies, even contacted lawyers. But Davidson was too powerful, had many important people in his pocket, and then in 1973, the letters stopped. The last one said, "Elizabeth, I'm close to succeeding. I found someone who can help. Someone Davidson can't touch. If all goes well, in a few weeks I can return. I can hug you and our children again. Wait. Have faith." But he never returned. Nathan felt his eyes fill with tears. Mrs. Miller was crying openly. "Did your grandma know?" she asked. "I think so," Nathan replied, his voice choked. "She must have received these letters and chose not to tell anyone." Why? It was a good question. Why would Elizabeth keep this a secret? Why would she let everyone think Albert was just a man who abandoned his family? Nathan continued rummaging in the box. There was one more paper, folded at the bottom. It was more recent, written in Elizabeth's handwriting. "My dear Nathan," it said, "you must be wondering why I never told this story. The truth is, I spent a long time angry at Albert. Even knowing he did what he did to protect us, a part of me couldn't forgive. But mainly, I didn't tell because I didn't want my children to carry this burden. Walter, Margaret, and the others, they built their lives believing their father was a coward who abandoned them. It was painful, but they moved on. If I told the truth, I would have to explain that their father died trying to protect them. I would have to talk about Oliver Davidson, the threats, the danger, and that would only bring pain. But you, Nathan, you are different. You have the strength that Albert had, the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. That's why I'm entrusting this story to you. What you do with this information is your choice, but there's one more thing you need to know. Penny isn't special just because she was trained. She's special because she's a direct descendant of the first chicken Albert gave me when we started dating. He called her Dawn, said she represented a new beginning, a new life we would build together. When Albert disappeared, Dawn was the only piece of him I had left. I cared for her until her final days, and then cared for her daughters, granddaughters, and so on. Penny is the 7th generation. Each of these chickens was special to me, and each gave me a marked egg on the most important day of my life, the day Albert returned. Nathan stopped breathing for a second. Albert returned? He kept reading. In 1973, 3 months after the last letter, Albert showed up at our doorstep. He was thin, sick, but alive. He had succeeded. He had gathered enough evidence to destroy Oliver Davidson, but the effort had taken its toll. Albert was sick. Cancer, the doctors said. He had just a few months to live. He spent that time with me, hidden because there was still danger. Davidson was under investigation, but his connections were still strong. When Albert died in January 1974, it was in my arms, and on that day Dawn laid a different egg. It had the same mark you saw on Penny, the wheel with 4 spokes like he used to draw. I later discovered that mark was Albert's way of saying everything was connected, that even when apart we were united. North, south, east, west, always pointing back to the center, back home. Since then, every chicken in this lineage lays one marked egg in their lifetime, at the right moment, when something important is about to happen. If Penny scratched 3 times and you found this box, it means her moment is near. Keep an eye out for the marked egg. When you see it, you'll know what to do. The letter ended there. Nathan read it 3 times, trying to process everything. Mrs. Miller was sitting in a garden chair, her face still wet with tears. "What a story," she whispered. "What an incredible and sad story." "My grandmother carried this alone her whole life," Nathan said. "The weight of it. She was strong, and she found you strong enough to share it." But Nathan didn't feel strong. He felt lost, confused. What was he expected to do with this information? Tell his uncles? His cousins? He looked at Penny. The chicken kept scratching normally, unaware of the emotional earthquake she had caused. A marked egg. Elizabeth said to watch for a marked egg. "I'll need to watch her every day," Nathan said, more to himself. "You can leave her here as long as necessary," offered Mrs. Miller. "I'm curious to see how this story ends." Nathan thanked her and got ready for another day. Classes in the morning, work at night. But now he had a new purpose, a mission his grandmother had entrusted to him. The following days established a routine. Nathan woke up early, watched Penny, checked for eggs. The chicken laid regularly, an egg every 2 or 3 days, but all were normal. No marks. He kept Albert's letters in a safe place, thinking about what to do with them. Part of him wanted to confront Walter, tell him the truth about their grandfather, but Elizabeth had chosen not to do that. There must have been a reason. 2 weeks passed like this. College, work, watching the chicken. His cousins sent occasional messages, gently teasing about the inheritance. Nathan didn't respond, until one April morning, when he approached the pen, he saw something different. Penny was standing still, motionless, staring right at him. On the ground, right in front of her, was an egg, and even from a distance, Nathan could see the mark. His heart raced. He opened the pen with trembling hands and picked up the egg carefully. It was a bit larger than the other eggs Penny had laid, and had a slightly different color, more creamy. And there, perfectly drawn on the shell, was the mark. The circle with 4 crossed rays in the center, exactly as in Elizabeth's description, like the symbol painted on Penny's feathers. "The time has come," murmured Nathan. But time for what? What was he expected to do? He remembered the letter. When you see it, you'll know what to do. Nathan looked at the egg from all angles. There was nothing different besides the mark. He shook it gently near his ear. It seemed normal. Should he break it? The idea seemed like sacrilege somehow. That egg was special. It meant something important. But maybe inside there was another message, another clue. Mrs. Miller came out of the house at that moment, still in her robe. Did something happen? The egg, the marked egg. She laid it. The woman approached, adjusting her glasses to see better. Wow, it's exactly as your grandmother described. I don't know what to do with it. Your grandmother said you would know. But he didn't know. Nathan went back inside, still holding the egg, and picked up Elizabeth's letter again. He reread every line, looking for clues he might have missed. When you see it, you'll know what to do. That was all it said. No specific instructions. Nathan spent the whole day thinking about it. In class, he was distracted. At work, he almost knocked over a stack of boxes from lack of attention. "Cooper, you've been impossible this week," complained Mr. Anthony. "Is there a problem at home?" "Sorry, Mr. Anthony, I'll do better." But he didn't. His mind was on the egg, the chicken, his grandmother's message. When he got home that night, he found something unexpected. There was a car parked in front of Mrs. Miller's house, a car that Nathan recognized. It was Margaret's. His heart tightened. What was she doing there? He entered through the front door. Voices came from the living room. Mrs. Miller was serving coffee to Margaret, who looked nervous. "Nathan," she stood up when she saw him, "we need to talk." "About what?" Margaret exchanged a look with Mrs. Miller, who discreetly withdrew to the kitchen. "About your grandmother, about the inheritance, about everything." Nathan sat down, cautious. "What is it?" "Walter doesn't know I'm here. He would be furious if he knew." "Why?" Margaret took a deep breath. "Because your grandmother told me something before she left, something she said she could only reveal when you found the marked egg." Nathan's blood ran cold. "How do you know about the egg?" "Elizabeth told me. A few days before she left. She said you would inherit Penny, that you would find the letters, and that when Penny laid the marked egg, I should look for you." "And how did you know it was today?" Margaret gave a sad smile. "I didn't. I've been coming here every week asking Mrs. Miller. Today she called me." Nathan looked toward the kitchen, but Mrs. Miller had disappeared. That lady knew more than she let on. "What do you have to tell me?" Margaret took her purse and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "Your grandmother gave me this, said to deliver it when the time came." Nathan took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was another letter from Elizabeth and documents that looked official. The letter said, "Nathan, if Margaret is giving this to you, it means Penny has laid the marked egg and you are ready for the full truth. What I told you in the letters was true, but it wasn't everything. Albert didn't die of cancer. He was poisoned." Nathan felt his stomach churn. "Oliver Davidson found out that Albert had gathered evidence against him. He managed to reach us, our home. Albert took something, I don't know what, but the doctors said it was poison. They couldn't save him. The authorities investigated, but Davidson had too much influence. The case was filed as a natural death. But I knew. I always knew. I spent years trying to prove it, gathering evidence, but it was impossible. Davidson was untouchable, until he fell himself years later for other crimes. But he never paid for what he did to Albert. Now all that is in the past. Davidson has been gone for a long time, but there's one thing left from this whole story. Something Albert hid before he was poisoned. He had saved money. Not much, but it was all he managed to save from years of work. This money was meant to rebuild our lives when he could return. But he never got the chance. Albert hid this money in a place only I would know how to find. And he left me clues. For years I searched, but I never managed to fully decipher them. Until I realized. The chickens. The marks on the eggs. Everything was connected to the chickens. Albert knew I would take care of Dawn. He knew I would keep the lineage. And somehow he trained the first chicken to mark the path. The problem is I never managed to follow the clues to the end. I got old, tired, and I realized it wasn't for me to discover. It was for you. The documents with this letter are deeds, properties that belong to Albert, bought with Davidson's dirty money but which Albert managed to transfer to his name before everything fell apart. These properties are worth a lot of money today, Nathan. A lot of money. But they can only be claimed with the right evidence, the evidence Albert hid along with the money he saved. Penny will take you there. Trust her. Trust what she shows you. Nathan finished reading and stayed silent for a long moment. Did you know all this? He asked Margaret. No. Elizabeth only told me it was important, that I should find you when the egg appeared. She didn't tell me the contents of the letter. And Walter? Does he know anything? Margaret shook her head. Walter still thinks Albert was a coward, and maybe it's better that way. You know your uncle. If he knew there was money and properties involved, he would try to take it all. Exactly. That's why Elizabeth trusted only you, and me, to some extent. Nathan looked at the documents. They were deeds for 3 properties, a lot in Port Angeles, a house in Tacoma, and a plot of land in Olympia. All in Albert Cooper's name, all dated 1972. If they were legitimate, and if they could be claimed, they would easily be worth millions. But first he needed the evidence Albert had hidden. Penny will take me there, murmured Nathan, remembering Elizabeth's words. What do you mean? That's what the letter says. The chicken will show me the way. Margaret looked at him as if he were crazy. Nathan, it's a chicken. How is it going to... You wouldn't understand. But I saw it. It scratched 3 times and led me to the first letters. Somehow it knows. That's impossible. Many things seem impossible, but here we are. Margaret stayed a while longer, asking questions, trying to understand. But eventually she left, making Nathan promise to keep her informed. Mrs. Miller reappeared as soon as Margaret left. Sorry I didn't tell you she was coming here. Your grandma asked me not to. You knew my grandma? I did. We were friends for many years. It was she who suggested I rent the room to you, actually. Said you were a good young man, that you needed help. Another piece falling into place. Elizabeth had planned everything carefully. Every detail. So you know the whole story? Most of it. Elizabeth told me about Albert, about the hardships, but I didn't know about the properties or the hidden money. I need to find where all this is, and apparently Penny is the key. Then let's pay close attention to her. In the following days, Nathan watched the chicken with extra care. It had returned to normal behavior after laying the marked egg. It scratched, ate, slept, nothing special. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Nathan kept the marked egg in a padded little box, afraid he might break it accidentally. He looked at it every night before sleeping, as if it would reveal its secrets. A week passed, then 2. Nothing happened. Nathan began to feel frustrated. Maybe he had misunderstood. Maybe Penny wasn't so special after all. Maybe that whole story was just the delusion of an elderly woman trying to give meaning to the last remaining things of her dead husband. But then on a Sunday morning, something changed. Nathan woke up to Mrs. Miller knocking on his bedroom door. Nathan, the chicken is acting strange. He jumped out of bed and ran to the backyard. Penny was in the pen, but she wasn't pecking around. She was standing still, staring fixedly to the east, and she was making a low, continuous sound that Nathan had never heard before. She's been like this for about 10 minutes, said Mrs. Miller. She doesn't move, just keeps looking in that direction and making this noise. Nathan entered the pen. Penny didn't react to his presence. She kept staring intently to the east, beyond the fence, beyond the houses, as if she could see something they couldn't. He followed the chicken's gaze, trying to understand what she was looking at. East. From Mrs. Miller's backyard, east led to where? Nathan ran inside and grabbed his phone. He opened the map, located the house, drew a line to the east. The line passed through several neighborhoods of Seattle, left the city, continued through the countryside of Washington State, and ended in Bayshore, at Elizabeth's property. She wants to go there, Nathan whispered. She's telling me to take her there. How do you know? I know. It didn't make rational sense, but there was something in Penny's posture, in the intensity of that fixed stare, that made it clear. She was indicating a path, a direction. Nathan took the marked egg, carefully stored it in a backpack along with the letters and documents, and prepared the transport box for Penny. "I'm going to Bayshore," he told Mrs. Miller. "Now." "Now? But it's Sunday. Don't you have work tomorrow?" "I'll call and say I'm sick. This is more important." Mrs. Miller helped him prepare everything. Nathan took his savings, the little he had, bought a bus ticket, and set off. The 3-hour trip seemed to last an eternity. Penny stayed quiet in the box, but Nathan could feel a different energy coming from her. It was as if the chicken knew she was going home. They arrived in Bayshore in the middle of the afternoon. Nathan took a taxi to Elizabeth's property. The house was empty, silent. Part of it now belonged to him, technically, since the land had been divided among the grandchildren, but no one had done anything with the place yet. Nathan opened the door using the key he still had. It smelled of mold and emptiness. It hurt to be there without Elizabeth. He took Penny to the back and released her in the original chicken coop. The bird seemed to relax immediately, as if returning home after a long journey. "And now?" Nathan asked aloud, half expecting the chicken to answer. Penny pecked a few times, drank some water, and then went to a specific corner of the coop, the northwest corner, and she started pecking, once, twice, 3 times. Nathan's heart raced. There it was, the indication. He grabbed a shovel from the shed and started digging where Penny had indicated. The soil was harder here, more compacted. It took time, effort. He dug 1/2 meter. Nothing. He continued. 60 centimeters, 70. And then the shovel hit something solid. Nathan dug around it with his hands. It was a safe. A small metal safe all covered in rust and dirt. With effort he managed to pull it out of the hole. It was heavy. There was an old lock, but the lid was so rusty it was almost loose. Nathan forced it, and the lid gave way. Inside was money, a lot of money. Old bills, some so old Nathan didn't even recognize them. But there were also old dollars and silver dollars, coins that had been used in the United States decades ago. And beneath the money, wrapped in plastic for protection, were documents, contracts, receipts, evidence of financial transactions between Oliver Davidson and several names Nathan didn't know, and a notebook in Albert's handwriting, detailing everything he had discovered. It was the evidence Albert had gathered, the evidence that could have destroyed Davidson if Albert had lived to use it. And along with the evidence, there were more deeds, more properties, more than Elizabeth had mentioned. Nathan sat on the floor of the chicken coop, surrounded by dirt, old money, and yellowed documents, and finally let the tears fall. Albert had fought. He had fought so hard to protect his family, to gather evidence, to do the right thing, and he had paid with his life. Elizabeth had carried this burden alone for decades. She had kept the secrets, protected the children from the painful truth, and in the end, had entrusted everything to Nathan. Why? Why him? But as he held those documents, Nathan began to understand. He was the only one who would value the truth more than the money, the only one who would understand the sacrifice Albert had made, the only one with the same perseverance, the same stubbornness to do what was right, even when it was difficult. Penny approached and gently pecked his hand. Nathan looked at the chicken. "You fulfilled your mission," he said, his voice choked. "7 generations of waiting, and you brought it all to light." The chicken scratched once and walked away, returning to its normal behavior. Nathan spent the night at Elizabeth's house, organizing everything he had found. The old money probably wasn't worth anything as currency anymore, but it might have collector's value. But that wasn't what mattered. The properties, those were valuable. With the documents and evidence Albert had kept, Nathan could legally claim them. He could finally realize the dream Albert had, to secure a safe future for the family. But what about the truth of how Albert died? About Oliver Davidson? Was it worth reopening those wounds? Nathan thought of Walter, of Margaret, of the cousins. They had built entire lives believing one version of the story. Changing that now would cause pain, confusion, anger. Maybe Elizabeth was right. Maybe some truths were too heavy. But there was one thing Nathan could do. He could honor Albert's memory. He could use those properties to do something good, something his grandpa would approve of. The next morning, Nathan called Margaret. "I found it," he said simply. "Found what?" "Everything. The evidence, the documents, the properties. Penny led me to it all." There was silence on the other end. How much is it worth?" "Millions. Maybe more, depending on what we can recover." "My God. But there's a condition." "Condition?" "Walter can't know. Not yet. I need time to organize everything, to figure out the best way to handle this. Nathan, I can't lie to my husband. I'm not asking you to lie. Just not to tell. Not yet. When the right time comes, you'll know." Margaret hesitated but agreed. She understood that Nathan had a plan, even if he didn't know exactly what it was yet. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Nathan sought out a lawyer specializing in inheritance and property law. He showed the documents, explained the situation, omitting the more delicate parts about poison and threats. The lawyer, a man named Dr. Patrick, was impressed. "This is extraordinary. If everything you've shown me is authentic, and I believe it is, you're sitting on a fortune. How long to resolve everything?" "Months. Maybe a year. There are processes to follow, checks to be done. But in the end, these properties will be yours." "What about the other people involved? My uncles, cousins?" "It depends. If your grandfather left these properties specifically to your grandmother, and your grandmother left them to you through inheritance, then they're yours. The other heirs have no right to them." Nathan nodded. Part of him felt guilty for not sharing with the family, but he remembered Elizabeth's words, the letter. She had chosen him for a reason. He returned to Seattle with Penny. The hen seemed satisfied, as if it knew its task was complete. It started laying normal eggs again without marks. Mrs. Miller was fascinated by the whole story. "Your grandmother was an incredible woman. Planning all this, keeping these secrets for so long." "She was. I just wish she had told me in person." Maybe she tried in her own way. Sometimes older people have a hard time talking about pain, about loss. It's easier to leave clues, to let the next generation figure it out on their own. Nathan thought about the conversations he had with Elizabeth in recent years. There were signs, he realized now, small comments about value, about looking beyond appearances, about perseverance. She was preparing him all along. College continued, the job at the market too. But Nathan had a goal now, a future to fight for. When the properties were officially his, he could quit his job, dedicate himself to his studies, maybe even help Mrs. Miller, who had been so kind. But the peace didn't last long. 2 months after finding the safe, Nathan received a call from Margaret. She was crying. Walter found out. I don't know how, but he found out. Nathan's stomach sank. Found out what? Everything. The properties. The money. He's furious. He says you're hiding the family inheritance, that he's going to take legal action. But it's not the family inheritance. It's the inheritance that Grandpa Albert left for Grandma Elizabeth, who left it to me. You know how Walter is. He thinks he's entitled to a share because he's Albert's son. Albert disappeared when he was a child. Elizabeth was the one who raised him, who worked and saved everything. Walter has no right to any of it. I know, Nathan, I know. But he's talking about lawyers, lawsuits. It's going to be a war. And it was. Walter hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit challenging the inheritance. He claimed that Albert's properties should be divided among all the children, not just go to Nathan through Elizabeth. Dr. Patrick was good, but the situation was complicated. There were complex legal questions about who had the right to what, about the validity of old documents, about the chain of inheritance. Nathan spent months going to hearings, providing documents, answering questions. It was draining, painful. Walter accused him of being greedy, of taking advantage of an elderly woman. Ryan and Jennifer naturally sided with their father. Only Margaret remained neutral, clearly torn between her husband and Elizabeth's wishes. This is exactly what she wanted to avoid, Nathan once said to Mrs. Miller, frustrated. Elizabeth knew that revealing everything would cause this mess. That's why she hid it, left it only for me. Greed makes people show their worst side. But it wasn't just greed, Nathan realized. It was pain, too. Walter had spent his whole life thinking his father had abandoned him. Now he found out that Albert had fought, had sacrificed himself. And the anger Walter felt towards Albert, for not having survived, for leaving them fatherless, was being directed at Nathan. The situation reached a breaking point at a particularly tense hearing. Walter was there, his lawyer presenting arguments, and Nathan with Dr. Patrick. It was then that Walter, in the middle of the argument, said something that changed everything. "My father was a coward who abandoned us. And now they want me to believe he was a hero? It's ridiculous." Nathan couldn't take it anymore. He stood up. "Your father was poisoned trying to protect you." Silence fell over the room. "What did you say?" Walter looked like he'd been punched. And then Nathan told them everything. About Oliver Davidson's threats. About Albert choosing to appear as abandoning them to protect the family. About how he'd returned sick. About the poison. About Elizabeth keeping this secret for decades. He showed the letters, the documents, the evidence. Walter turned pale. Margaret started crying. Ryan and Jennifer, who had come to the hearing, were shocked. "Why did our grandma never tell us?" asked Jennifer, her voice trembling. "Because she wanted to protect you from the pain," Nathan replied. "Just like Albert wanted to protect you from danger. They made difficult choices to spare you from suffering. The hearing was suspended. Everyone needed time to process." Walter left without speaking to anyone. Margaret stayed, approaching Nathan. "You didn't have to tell," she said. "Yes, I did. This fight was destroying what was left of our family. It was the last thing Grandma wanted. And now the truth is out. It's up to each person to decide what to do with it." In the following days, Nathan waited. He didn't know if Walter would continue with the lawsuit, if the revelation would change anything. It was Ryan who called first. "My father is different since the hearing. He barely speaks, just keeps looking at old photos of Grandpa Albert. How is he?" "Confused, sad, angry, but not at you. At himself, I think, for spending so much time hating someone who was trying to protect him. I'm sorry." "It's not your fault, Nathan. You just brought the truth to light." A week later, it was Walter who showed up at Mrs. Miller's door. Nathan was leaving for classes when he saw his uncle standing there, with an expression he'd never seen before. Vulnerability. "Can we talk?" Walter asked. They sat in the small front garden. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. "I read all the letters you showed," Walter began. "I read them 5 times, trying to understand, trying to accept." Nathan waited. "I spent 50 years believing my father didn't love me, that he abandoned us because we weren't good enough. I built my whole life on that anger, that rejection. He loved you. That's why he did what he did. I know. Now I know. But it's 5 decades of resentment, Nathan. You can't erase it just like that overnight. No one's asking you to erase it, just to understand." Walter nodded, his eyes glistening. "About the properties, I'm withdrawing the lawsuit." Nathan blinked, surprised. "Really? My mother left all this to you for a reason. She knew you better than I did. And now, after seeing how you fought to honor her memory and my father's, I understand why." "Uncle Walter, I won't lie and say it doesn't hurt. It hurts a lot, but it's the right thing. My mother knew what she was doing." He stood up, ready to leave, but hesitated. "That chicken, Penny, did she really lead you to all this?" "She did. I know it sounds crazy, but she did." Walter let out a short, humorless laugh. "My mother was quite a woman. Even a chicken she managed to make into something special." After Walter left, Nathan sat in the backyard, looking at Penny. The chicken pecked calmly, unaware of the drama she had helped resolve. Weeks turned into months. With the lawsuit withdrawn, the transfer of the properties to Nathan's name went faster. Dr. Patrick managed to resolve all the legal issues, prove the authenticity of the documents, establish the chain of inheritance. Nathan became officially the owner of 3 valuable properties. He could sell them, become rich, never worry about money again. But that's not what he did. He sold the lot in Port Angeles, which was the least developed. With the money, he created an educational fund for low-income youth in Bayshore, in honor of Elizabeth and Albert. He paid for his own studies and those of 3 other students in the first year. The house in Tacoma he renovated and turned into a small community center, offering free sewing workshops, a tribute to Elizabeth's work. And the land in Olympia he kept. He built a small house there, a place to reflect, to remember, to honor the memory of all who came before. The property in Bayshore he divided. He gave one part to Margaret, recognizing her loyalty to Elizabeth and her help throughout the process. The other part he kept, turning the house into a memorial for Albert and Elizabeth, telling their story to anyone who would listen. Walter visited the memorial once. He spent hours there, reading the displayed letters, with Nathan's permission, looking at the old photos. When he left, he hugged Nathan for the first time in years. "Thank you," was all he said. Ryan and Jennifer apologized for having doubted him. Nathan forgave them. They were family after all. Mrs. Miller got a complete home renovation, courtesy of Nathan. She protested, but he insisted. Without her, none of that would have happened. And Penny? The chicken continued living peacefully in Mrs. Miller's backyard for 3 more years. She laid eggs regularly, none with special marks anymore. Her mission was complete. When Penny finally passed away from old age, Nathan buried her in the garden of the Bayshore property, near the chicken coop where generations of her ancestors had lived. He planted a rose bush on the spot, and with the feathers of Penny that he had kept, he made a small picture with the symbol, the circle with 4 crossed rays, as a permanent keepsake. But the story didn't end there, because Penny had left descendants, her daughters, granddaughters, and Nathan took care of all of them, keeping the lineage alive. And exactly 7 generations after Penny, a new chicken was born. Nathan named her Dawn, like the first one. Dawn was different, smarter, more attentive. She had the same golden feathers as Penny, and gradually Nathan began to notice patterns in her behavior. She would scratch in specific places, look in specific directions, and on a summer day she laid an egg with a mark. The cycle continued. Because Elizabeth had learned from Albert, and Albert had learned from his own experiences, and both had taught Nathan the most important lesson: true value isn't in what you possess, but in what you leave behind. The years passed. Nathan graduated, became an accountant like his grandpa. He met a woman named Helen, got married, had children, and to his children he told the story of Elizabeth and Albert, of Penny and Dawn, of how a simple chicken had revealed family secrets and changed everything. Walter and Nathan never became close, but they established a peace. Margaret visited regularly, bringing news of the family. Ryan and Jennifer went on with their lives but kept in touch. And Mrs. Miller, who witnessed everything from the start, became like a second grandma to Nathan. She was right from the beginning. Elizabeth was a special woman who knew exactly what she was doing. 10 years after the reading of that fateful will, Nathan was at the memorial in Bayshore, doing the usual maintenance when he received an unexpected visitor. It was an elderly woman with grey hair leaning on a cane. She looked around the memorial with tears in her eyes. "Excuse me," said Nathan. "Can I help you? Are you Nathan? Nathan Cooper?" "I am." "And you are?" "My name is Cynthia. Cynthia Davidson." The last name made Nathan freeze. "Davidson? You are—" "Daughter of Oliver Davidson, yes." Nathan didn't know what to say. All the emotions he had processed over the years came back at once: anger, sadness, confusion. "I didn't come to cause trouble," Cynthia hurried to say. "I came because I saw a report about this memorial, about the story of Elizabeth and Albert, and I had to come. I needed to speak with you." "Why?" "Because I spent my whole life not knowing the truth about my father. I thought he was just a successful businessman. I only found out after he died, when I was organizing his papers, what he really was, what he did. She sat on a bench, her hands trembling on the cane. "I found things in his documents, references to Albert Cooper, to threats, to poison. I couldn't believe it. I tried to convince myself that I was misinterpreting, but I wasn't. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to know that not all the Davidsons are like him, that I'm sorry. So very sorry. I know it doesn't change anything, it doesn't bring anyone back, but I need you to know." Nathan looked at that elderly woman, clearly tormented by her father's sins, and he felt something unexpected. Compassion. "You are not responsible for what your father did. But I carried his name. I benefited from the money he earned in terrible ways. You can redeem yourself in your own way, by helping others, doing the good that he did not." Cynthia nodded, wiping away tears. "I want to make a donation to the educational fund you created, in the name of Albert Cooper. It's the least I can do. You don't have to. I need to, for my own peace of mind." And so she did, a generous donation that allowed the fund to expand, to help more students. And Cynthia became a regular visitor to the memorial, always bringing flowers, always spending time there in silence. It was a strange kind of healing. It didn't erase the past, but somehow it helped build something better in the future. Nathan understood that this was what Elizabeth wanted, not revenge, not bitterness, but the possibility of turning pain into hope, loss into legacy. On a quiet afternoon, 20 years after inheriting Penny, Nathan was sitting on the porch of the house in Olympia, watching Dawn 7, the seventh dawn in the lineage, peck in the garden. His children, now teenagers, were playing nearby. Helen was reading beside him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how strange life is, how a chicken can change everything." Helen laughed. "You and your philosophical chickens, they're not just chickens, they're messengers, connecting generations, revealing truths. Do you think Dawn 7 will lay a marked egg someday? Maybe, when the time is right, when there's something important to reveal. And if there isn't, then she'll live a normal, happy life, and that's fine too." But Nathan had a hunch, that hunch he had learned to recognize over the years. Dawn 7 was special. He saw it in her eyes, in the way she moved, in the attention she paid to everything around her. And he was right. 6 months later, Dawn 7 laid a marked egg. Nathan found it on an autumn morning. The familiar symbol, the circle with 4 rays, was there, but this time there was something more. Small marks around the circle, as if forming letters. He studied the egg for hours, trying to decipher it. And then he realized. They weren't letters, they were numbers, coordinates. Geographic coordinates. With trembling hands, Nathan entered the coordinates into the GPS. They led to a place in Olympia, not far from where he was. "Let's investigate," said Helen, always his partner in adventures. They went to the indicated location. It was a preserved wooded area. They had to walk a bit, following the GPS to the exact point. And there, protected by trees and vegetation, was a marker, a large stone with inscriptions. Nathan cleaned the stone and read, "Albert Cooper, 1940-1974, unknown hero, loving father, rest in peace." His heart stopped. There it was, the actual grave of Albert, the place where he was really buried, away from prying eyes, protected by Elizabeth. "How did the chickens know about this place?" Helen asked, amazed. "Elizabeth must have trained the first Dawn. And somehow this knowledge, this instinct, passed from generation to generation. It made no scientific sense, but it made sense in the context of everything that had happened. Some things didn't need logical explanation. Some things simply were. Nathan visited that place many times after that. He took Walter once. The man cried before his father's grave, finally having a place to make peace with the past. And Nathan understood that this was Elizabeth's final gift. Not properties, not money, but the chance to connect with Albert, to honor his memory in the place she had chosen for him to rest. The story of Nathan, Elizabeth, Albert, and the special chickens spread. It started locally in Bayshore, but eventually gained regional attention. Journalists came, wanting to tell the story. Nathan was cautious. He didn't want to turn his grandma and grandpa's memory into a spectacle, but he also understood there was value in sharing, in showing that family was more than blood, that legacy was more than money, that love could transcend generations. So he gave some interviews. He told the story carefully, respecting privacy where necessary, but being honest about the struggles, the challenges, the revelations, and many people connected with it. Letters started arriving, people telling their own stories of family secrets, complicated inheritances, late discoveries about relatives who had passed. Nathan responded when he could. He offered what he had learned, that the truth, however painful, was better than lies, that forgiveness was possible, even in difficult situations, that true love sometimes meant making choices others wouldn't understand. Mrs. Miller, now over 90 years old, became a kind of local sage. People sought her out to hear the story firsthand. She welcomed everyone with coffee and cookies, telling about the day Nathan showed up with a box containing a chicken. Margaret became one of the biggest supporters of the memorial and the educational fund. Walter, though still a reserved man, contributed in his own ways, often making anonymous donations. Ryan and Jennifer, inspired by the story, started their own charity projects. The family, which had been nearly destroyed by the inheritance dispute, was now more united than ever. But for Nathan, the most important thing wasn't the properties, the recognition, or even the family reconciliation. It was knowing he had fulfilled the mission Elizabeth had entrusted to him. He had honored Albert's memory. He had brought the truth to light. He had used the inheritance to do good. And he had kept alive the special lineage of chickens that were more than just birds. One spring morning, Nathan woke with a strange feeling, as if something important was about to happen. He went out to the garden and found Dawn Seven standing still, staring intently at him, and there, beside her, was another marked egg. But this time the mark was different. It wasn't the circle with 4 rays, it was a heart. Simple, perfect, unmistakable. Nathan picked up the egg carefully and felt something he hadn't expected. Peace, a deep peace that came from within. There were no more secrets to unearth, no more hidden truths. This egg wasn't a clue. It was a message from Elizabeth through the generations of chickens across time and space. A message that said, "You did well, I'm proud. Keep loving, keep caring, keep being who you are." Nathan smiled, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, Grandma," he whispered to the wind, "for everything, for trusting me, for teaching me what really matters." Dawn Seventh scratched the ground once and walked away, returning to normal behavior. Her mission was complete. The missions of all the chickens were complete. The cycle had closed. Nathan stored the heart-marked egg in a special box. It wasn't meant to be opened. There were no clues inside. It was just meant to be appreciated, remembered, honored. And that night, sitting at the dinner table with Helen and the children, Nathan told the story once again. The story of a wise woman who turned a simple chicken into a legacy worth more than all the houses, all the land, all the money in the world. Because the true legacy wasn't material, it was love, it was memory, it was the ability to see value where others saw nothing. It was perseverance, it was courage, it was doing what was right even when it was hard. And that, indeed, was worth more than anything. End of story. Now tell me, what did you think of this amazing story? Would you have done the same as Nathan upon discovering the truth about Albert? How do you think you would handle a legacy as special as Penny's? Leave your comment sharing what you felt, your honest opinion about Elizabeth's choices, and how this story touched your heart. If you liked it, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories, and share it with someone who needs to hear about love, family, and legacies that transcend generations. Thank you for staying until the end.